town of Watkinsville, how still we see thee lie above thy deep and dreamless sleep. The silent stars go by.
I don't expect there's any other small community that has the sort of record we have in the photographs we attribute to William M. White. They were made here in Watkinsville around 1900. I first discovered the glass plate negatives in the antique shop across the street. I'd stopped by to buy things for my house, and there on the floor was a dusty old box full of glass plate negatives. The proprietor said, "Those are all about people here in Watkinsville." And I said, "Well, for heaven's sake, don't let them leave until we can see about keeping them here."
100 years ago, a boy who lived here began to take pictures. He probably never finished. From the upstairs porch of his house, he would see the road to Athens. Once, when it snowed, he took his camera out again to look across Main Street toward Water Street and photographed what he saw. A short walk down that street, he photographed one of his neighbors, with the town's leather and shoe shop and the back of the courthouse behind her. On yet another day, while it was still too early for men to plow, he took pictures of some of them in front of the courthouse. They sit around the drinking water barrel in the city square. The photographer's home is at the edge of the picture on the left. The village inn is near the center, and the old hotel, now known as the Eagle Tavern site, is the more prominent building. The inn and the old hotel housed people whose presence was required in court, as Watkinsville was the county seat for Clark County. Behind the courthouse were modest residences. Mr. and Mrs. Saul Camp might have greeted him there. He attended school in this little building at the end of School Street. It was painted white, while other schools, like the one in Salem, might remain unpainted. The Ligon House, farther up Main Street at Barnett Shoals Road, would house the Benny McCree family. Sometime later, the family's portraits were shot through the photographer's lens. And all along the way, for several years, the young man kept taking pictures.
Beautiful dreamer, wake unto me. Starlight and dewdrops are waiting for thee. Sounds of the rude world heard in the day, lulled by the moonlight, have all passed away.
His early negatives were barely over 2 inches square. This is a contact print from his original album. It shows his mother, Matt White, and his sister, Annie. The extra head peeping around from behind Annie is actually Annie herself. She moved during the long exposure. Portraits of other persons, some known, some unknown, follow in profusion. Twins, Leslie and Bessie Willoughby, with Emma Bell in the center. An unidentified lady. Maud Thrasher, at her home near the painted schoolhouse. Maud's sister, Daisy, with an unidentified friend, who just might be one of the Durham girls. When Maud eloped, she pretended to be visiting the Durhams. Walton Booth, with two friends. Annie White. Joe Veal. Vera Veal, Joe's sister. More ladies, their identity unknown. Ed Johnston in cap and gown. Annie Billups, whom Ed would later marry. Annie's brother, Robert Billups. And the photographer himself, Will White. From the beginning, our young photographer's devotion to his subjects, combined with a certain playfulness, characterize his work. He placed some portraits in a chair on the roof to rephotograph them. We can see, incidentally, the old flower pits where ferns were kept during the winter, and early garden plants could be started. An orchard lies just beyond. Later on, his subjects got up on the same roof. Vera Veal is next to Walton Booth, whom she would later marry. Vera's sister, Lenira, puts a finger in her mouth. Lenira alone. Lenira with Will White. Lenira with Will's family, and Escus Elder next to her. Lenira dressed up. And Lenira indoors. Obviously, she had become a special friend. The photographs are getting better. Mr. Bob Ashford, who would become Watkinsville's unofficial historian. Walton Booth. Walton appears often, being a friend, neighbor, not to mention a first cousin to the photographer. And on the same day, Will White. Each must have taken the picture of the other. Will White entered the University of Georgia in 1897. He had classes in the new science building. It did not take long for him to find his way to the roof, or at least to an upstairs window, to photograph the Athens skyline. The University of Georgia's chapel still had its large cupola, and the Robert Toombs oak still lived, if only as a snag. It was beneath this oak that the famed orator Robert Toombs once delivered a speech which drew a larger audience than the one inside the chapel for another service. In the science building, he studied X-ray, which was still primitive enough for the young men to do without the protection of lead aprons. No one considered the possibility of genetic effects back then. He watched Field Day, but could not, of course, photograph his own participation. Georgia, then as now, had Georgia Tech for an opponent. He joined the Cadet Corps and watched baseball games from a room on the top floor of Old College. Played cards. Was a junior speaker for 1899. And quite possibly became something of a dandy as well. White remained in school as his friends went off to fight in the Spanish-American War of 1898. This panorama of tents was the camp in Athens called Brooklyn. It was near the present intersection of Hawthorne and West Broad Street. The seamy Stovall Chapel can be made out just on the horizon. The encampment was called Brooklyn because of the large number of New Yorkers in training there. The officers there did not find it beneath their dignity to keep a dog. They made friends with a family on Hill Street, where Will White had relatives or friends. Will may have occupied a room there himself. And when the soldiers shipped out for Cuba, Panama, or the Philippines, they wrote letters and sent presents, while their Athens friends played in their tents.
Just a weary end for you, all the time a feeling blue, wishing for you, wondering when you'd be coming home again. Restless, don't know what to do, just a weary end for you.
Athens was not all work. Life in White's world was full of fun and games, and friends of all ages and every persuasion. And in the summer, in July, out of school, Will White was back in Watkinsville, and he and his friends could camp out.
On a lake where drooped the willow, long time ago, where the rock threw back the billow, brighter than snow, dwelt a maid beloved and cherished by high and low. But with autumn leaves she perished long time ago. Rock and tree and flowing water long time ago, bird and bee and blossom taught her love's spell to know. While to my fond words she listened, murmuring low, tenderly her blue eyes glistened long time ago.
On Thursday morning, the 20th, ere the peaceful slumbers of quiet old Watkinsville were broken by the dawn of another day, a camping party composed of Messrs. Will White, Walter Booth, Lon Murray, Herschel Harris, Joe Veal, and the rider were well on our way to the mountains with high anticipations of the enjoyment the 10 days' outing held in store for us. And it might as well be said in the beginning that we were not in the least disappointed in our expectations. As we were leaving Athens, we caught our first glimpse of old Saul as he slowly rose above the trees, casting his rosy rays around us in such a manner that foretold of a perfect day and pleasant journey. About 3 miles above the classic city, on account of the loud and piercing shrieks of hunger that arose from our party, we were compelled to strike camp for breakfast. And after doing all the harm that 6 hungry boys could possibly do to our lunches, a picture was taken of our first camp, and we were once more on our way. On account of having taken the wrong road at Athens, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon before we reached Harmony Grove. The sight of so many new buildings springing up on all sides impressed us, that Harmony Grove is indeed a lively, progressive little city. We cannot tarry here, because we hope to reach Homer before we stop for the night, and as yet Homer was 11 miles away. So we drove on through the town, and just as the evening shades began to fall around us, we arrived in sight of the hospitable home of that good and fearless man of God who served the Watkinsville circuit so well and so faithfully last year, and who is now the much-beloved pastor of the Homer circuit, Reverend J.S. Askew, where we were never more kindly welcomed than by him, his good wife, and most delightful family. After resting a while, we were ushered into the dining room, where was set before us a good and bountiful supper, which, after having partaken of the good things of this life, we felt refreshed after the long ride of the day. Supper over, it wasn't very long before the guests to the sociable, which, by the way, was given in our honor, began to arrive, and thus the opportunity was given us to meet the belles and beaux of Homer. Space forbids of an elaborate description, but suffice it to say that we never felt more at home and had a more enjoyable time than we had on the evening of July 20th at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Askew. We arrived at the Falls Saturday afternoon about 3 o'clock, and we were very busy from that time until dark, stretching our tents, arranging our camp, caring for the stock, etc. After cooking and eating supper, we all retired to the tent for what we hoped would be a good night's rest. But alas, for the forgetfulness of boys. We forgot to make a ditch around the tent, and during the night the hardest sort of rain came up, and when we awoke it was but to find ourselves in water nearly deep enough to swim in. Sunday morning broke bright and clear, and after eating a hearty breakfast we left camp in charge of our driver and slowly wended our way to the highest point overlooking the falls. And as we gazed downward, the scene that met our eyes was one that no mortal pen can ever describe. Away down 1,800 feet below, we could see and hear the deafening roar of the mighty rushing waters as they leaped from cascade to cascade, finally forming a tremendous cataract that sounded like the roar of a distant cannon as it went dashing, splashing into the awful whirlpool 90 feet below. It was indeed a scene of the sublimest beauty and awful grandeur, and a picture that will be forever engraved upon the minds of the Watkinsville boys that gazed upon that beautiful scene on that bright Sunday morning in July. By that picture, we were taught and impressed in that one short hour to appreciate more the wonderful power and sublimity of God and the frailty of man than human tongue or pen could teach us in 100 years.
Would God I were the tender apple blossom that floats and falls from off the twisted bough, to lie and faint within your silken blossom, within your blossom, as that does now. Oh, would I were a little burnished apple for you to pluck, me gliding by so cold, while sun and shade your robe of lawn will dapple, your robe of lawn and your hair spun gold. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where you ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home, when Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is He. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He cares for me. Oh, His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He cares for me. I sing because I'm happy, I sing because I'm free, for His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. Whenever I am tempted, whenever clouds arise, when songs give place to sighing, when hope within me dies, I draw Thee closer to Him. From care He sets me free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He cares for me. Oh, His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He cares for me. I sing because I'm happy, I sing because I'm free, for His eye